represent Thomas Bell-Wright International Consultants. We completed 25 years in the region and has started as a curtain wall testing laboratory 25 years ago. And over the years, we expanded into doing fire testing, started with a 3x3 furnace and a Steiner tunnel for the reaction to fire tests. And over a period of the last 7-8 years, we have been expanding into reaction to fire as per European standards, as well as the fire propagation tests as per the American and the British standards. We also recently added 2 large furnaces for fire resistance tests, a 4 meters by 5 meters vertical furnace and a 4 meters by 5 meters horizontal furnace, both with load bearing capability, and hence expanded our offering for probably the largest laboratory in terms of passive fire protection products and testing of passive fire protection products across maybe East Africa right up to Bangladesh. So welcome everybody. We are today at the last session in the awareness series that we started back in April. And it has been a very interesting journey. We have focused on passive fire protection and compliance and gone deep into comprehension and understanding of various aspects of passive fire protection, compliance, understood what is a good way to procure, specify, and today we will talk about a very, very important aspect, which is after the installation, is after the procurement is done and the installation is started. And this is a key element for the implementation of fire and life safety strategy. A lot of us know that passive fire protection, which is a key element of fire and life safety, has worked over the last 3 decades. You would notice, as for this graph, that the number of fatalities have reduced drastically, goes to show that the strategies that have evolved over the years have worked very, very well. And a key strategy which comes out of passive fire protection is called compartmentalization. A lot of you might already be familiar with compartmentalization as a fire resistance concept. What is compartmentalization? As a basic, if there is a fire that gets started anywhere in any kind of a building, whether it's an office or a house or any kind of an occupancy, it is designed such that the fire is contained within the place where the fire has begun. This is the basis of passive fire protection, so that the fire should not grow and should be limited where it should be limited to where it started. Now, in order to compartmentalize, I'll take a pause and get a quick feedback if someone can reply back and saying if I can hear, because I'm getting messages from some people whether it's starting or not. Could someone give me a ping back that you can hear me properly? Super. Thank you so much, Mohammed. So coming back to, yes, how do you make containment for any occupancy, any type of room that we are in or we have seen? We would notice that we have wall systems and doors, which we all know to be fire rated. But for any building in any compartment to communicate with the outside world, we need openings. And these openings range from mechanical, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and so many other types of breaking in to what is a compartment, because all of us cannot live in an airtight, watertight place. So how exactly does the compartment get broken? People familiar with openings and fire stopping and MEP work know that whether you are going over the false ceiling or several parts of the building where you have ducting, electrical cabling, and piping, and so on and so forth, the compartment is broken in to create way or make way for various aspects that can help the compartment in the building communicate with the outside world. So what in effect happens is someone designs and implements passive fire protection, procures approved products, materials, installs them correctly, and then as a next step, as part of MEP work and so many other things, these fire-rated compartments are cut and broken into, and a lot of the walls and original designs become derated or no rated. So now the next process is that someone has to re-rate and bring back the fire resistance and compartmentalization which was designed. And how do you do this? And this is where openings and fire stoppings come in. People who may not be familiar with this, and if you search the internet, there is gigabytes and gigabytes of data and images and videos which are describing fire stopping and how fire stopping is often done incorrectly, etc. So I'm not going to delve into several such details, but specifically, we will be talking about a better comprehension of how fire stopping is correctly procured, correctly installed, and correctly maintained. And I start with some basics. I have put together some definitions with the help of my friend and colleague John Muse, who helped me create a good amount of information for my slides. So thanks to him. He has decades and decades of fire stopping experience and heads the fire stopping inspections at Thomas Bell-Wright. I'm not going to read through all of these. The webinar is recorded, and one of the key is that you can play back and read through for someone who would want to read through. I will just read through two types as a definition. What is a membrane penetration and what is a through penetration? A membrane penetration is a breach in one side of a floor ceiling, roof ceiling, or a wall assembly to accommodate an item installed into or passing through the assembly. And when we talk about floor ceiling or roof ceiling or wall assembly, we are alluding to fire rated assemblies, which means these assemblies are fire resistant to a given rating as per the design. In the same line, I will read through penetrations, which is an opening, as you would understand, in both sides of the floor or floor ceiling or wall assembly to accommodate an item passing through the breach. And the word breach is very important, as you will understand through the course of the slides, that the breach is done or the opening is made to a rated assembly. And these rated assemblies have been brought to shape, brought to form after many steps, right from the architects and designers who designed as per the code and local requirements that what fire rating should be of a given compartment. These are cut through and broken into to facilitate the incoming and outgoing openings. Moving on, a few more definitions. These definitions are more related to the North American standards, the F rating and the T rating. And I'll read these because these are interesting. The time period, the penetration Firestop system limits the spread of flames through the penetration when tested in accordance to Astm 814 or UL 1479. In order to achieve an F rating, the Firestop system must also maintain its structural integrity. And a T rating is the time period during which the penetration Firestop system limits the spread of flames through the penetration and the temperature rise on the unexposed side of the assembly, including on the penetrating item, to a maximum temperature rise of 325 degrees Fahrenheit above its initial temperature when tested in accordance to ASTM E814 or UL 1479. These terms, though original from the American codes, are often used in this region to describe similar rating coming in from the European or British test methods. An L rating is for air leakage, and a W rating is for the water leakage. Now, how do we really maintain the compartmentalization in case after you cut through and add on the fire stopping? A lot of us are familiar with images and concepts that when a fire happens, the compartment is able to contain the fire within. For a few seconds, I would like you to imagine the photograph on the right and imagine that the area above the false ceiling, above the television and the seating that you see, has openings which are carrying cables and ducts. So for you to imagine that how and with what properties does the fire stopping material system design is able to contain the hot gases, the smoke, and the increased temperature on the other side of the wall where the fire is happening. This is where I would like to talk about certain properties which are used by manufacturers of fire stopping material, designers of fire stopping systems. These are primarily chemical or mechanical properties which bring about re-rating or which help subcontractors re-rate the derated partition systems. So let's start with intumescence. You must have heard the phrase lots of times. It is to increase in volume upon exposure to heat. An endothermic reaction, also known to a few, is a reaction when the system or components or materials absorb the heat, and using this heat, the endothermic reaction, the materials decompose to create the fire resistance needed. Ablative reaction is the reaction where the material resists heat transfer by using the heat of exposure to actually erode the material. And insulation, obviously used in many other parts, is the property to resist the transfer of heat as a result of its low thermal conductivity. The reason to bring out these is for everybody to kind of imagine and understand that the capability or the ability for these materials and systems to produce the fire resistant behavior is primarily a chemical reaction. Some in mechanical, but primarily a chemical reaction. So you can imagine a factory producing chemicals, and imagine a shop floor where people like you and me who are doing their everyday jobs have to ensure consistency and repeatability of the resultant chemicals, which are packaged in different forms and sold off for ensuring that fire and life safety is maintained in buildings and occupancies far, far away from factories. The reason I bring this out is because there are several layers related to compliance and fire compliance when it comes to openings and fire stopping material. Let's begin with understanding how are these validated or approved. There are typically two different methods to validate that how a existing compartmentalized section of a building or an existing fire rated element, which could be a wall system or a door set, when cut through and opened, will regain back its fire resistance through a series of installations and operations. A method which is the first method is where the same test method which was used to validate the fire resisting element. So let us take an example and imagine a gypsum board based partition wall system, which has been tested as per ASTM E119 as an American fire resistance standard. Such a wall has been cut open for cable tray as a through penetration. Cable trays are laid and installed, and now various methods, systems, materials are used to bring back the fire resistance rating of the wall system. And the same test, the ASTM E119, is hence performed to check and validate that the same rating can come back or not. This approach is often used specific to projects where there is a need to get the reassurance that the system which has been designed to re-rate the the partition performs. The second method is a slightly different approach, wherein the test method used for the partitioning element is not used. There is a more focused specific test method designed for validating, let's say, through penetrations or fire resistive type of materials. As an example, ASTM E814 or the UL 1479 and several others. And in such a configuration, the fire stopping designs are validated through fire resistance tests, often similar, but they are not tested as part of this specific configuration in which will be used. These test methods often provide laboratories, certification bodies, fire consultants, contractors, a broader understanding of how a set of test results can be used to provide proof that the same configuration can function in other configurations as well. Some of you would have probably seen a fire resistance test happening for through penetrations. Sometimes these tests can be very, very interesting. This particular time-lapse video that you see is the European test being conducted in our facility, the EN1366. I guess this is -3 or I'm not sure, -4. These tests are specific
Hello?
tests for conducting or validating a general design as well. In case anybody has any questions, please feel free to use the chat interface. I would urge attendees to avoid unmuting themselves, please. It will help everybody else attending the session as well. Thank you. Moving on, the test methods are just a simple piece of information or data that comes across for understanding how a given installation in a given set of materials which were installed in the laboratory performed. And bringing me to my favorite subject of certification and listing and compliance, and how people often misunderstand certification. And this becomes very, very important to understand the concept of certification when we are talking of solutions based on materials. The certification of the manufacturing location is a series of steps that result in providing the assurance to the buyer of the material of a given set of properties. So as an example, if we talk of caulking or mastic or any type of chemical produced in a factory where the product is sampled, the product is tested in one or several configurations, and a comprehensive audit is done repeatedly at the manufacturing premises to check that the repeatability of that specific property, which has been validated in that specific configuration or series of configurations that were tested, will exist. So the certification is of a given product, just one product. You can imagine a set of chemicals, and the certification says that these chemicals will perform as per the defined certificated property when they are installed in a given way. So certifications, for a better understanding, I will take 3 examples for everyone to kind of just imagine and understand a little better. So if you imagine a fire-resistant door or a fire-resistant door assembly, which is manufactured at a given location in Dubai or Sharjah or anywhere in the world, and this manufacturer goes to a third-party certification body and gets 1 or maybe 5, 6 designs of the fire doors tested and certified. What this practically means is that a given door assembly, which is the door frame, the door leaf, the way the door leaf is designed, along with the hardware, etc., will comply to a given fire resistant rating, to a given test method to which it has been certified. And all of this is given the conditions that the combination of hardware, the combination of installation methods, which are defined and detailed by the manufacturer, are all the same as defined in the certification, or what is called the certification and listing. Now, often this is relatively easy because you will just have one primary supplier who will probably even procure the hardware and define how the installation should be done to keep its warranties and keep the assurance that they're saying that this system is fire resistant rated. From here, imagine and move to another example of a fire rated wall system designed and assembled and installed on the basis of fire rated boards. So assuming these gypsum boards are manufactured somewhere in UAE, Ras Al Khaimah, the factory is audited and will be audited for ensuring that there is a repeatability of manufacturing of the board. And the board manufacturer has a slew of properties that they need to ensure, whether they are physical properties or mechanical properties or fire resistant rating of the system, which is the end result of using these gypsum boards. So this system typically, as an example, would have studs and tracks, insulation material, and many of these details are defined and frozen in what is called the certification listing directory. In the certification listing directory, there could be one or several systems, and these systems are demonstrating the fire resistant property. And the resultant system comes from not only the board manufacturer, but many other manufacturers who may or may not be audited for repeatability of their product's performance. And the resultant system will be fire rated only and only if all the component suppliers are able to repeatably deliver the same materials, and the installers are able to very, very efficiently duplicate the way the system was installed in the testing laboratory. So here we already have a few layers which are beyond the scope of the product manufacturer who is certified, and beyond the scope of the certification body who is going to the manufacturing location to audit the plant for ensuring repeatability of production. Now we move to the next step, or the third example, where we are talking of a fire stopping solution or a fire stopping design, which means we have a layer where you have several steps of uncertainty because you have an installer of a fire rated wall system as an example. You have other material suppliers who end up making a wall system. And this wall system is cut through or broken into in almost any way desired by a given application, which means that the hole could be a 1 inch in diameter for some cabling, or it could be a much larger opening for a large cable tray or a duct or so on and so forth. So you need a very, very comprehensive listing system to explain how a certified and a listed fire stopping material would function and perform if it aims to come back and re-rate the partition of what it was supposed to be. I will give some examples. This, what you see on your screen, is a listing from the UL certification directory. And this listing, as you may be able to see, comes in, it has a lot of detail. And for those who may be seeing a certification and listing of the UL certification directory, I'll just walk you through the fact that UL has category codes, or what you see as X, H, E, Z. And several such codes define standard systems, standard designs, which are detailed on the directory. And often the certified manufacturer or certified manufacturing location will produce a product which is identified through a certification mark, a certification number. And the listing goes to great lengths in explaining all the properties. As an example, you see the F, the T, the L ratings as compliance to ASTM E814 here, and the Canadian equivalent. And these listings are often detailed not only through drawings, defining that under what circumstances and in which all system would such a performance or repeatability of performance be available, but several other aspects are frozen. There are details which will be written and explained in terms of how much variation is allowed in dimensions. And as an example, if you read 2A on the screen, which talks about coated ducts, and there is an asterisk next to it, it means that the coated ducts, which are used to design and define how the fire resistance will be repeatably demonstrated by the fire stopping system, it will only be such if the coated ducts are UL certified as the same certification body. So if you read further on the screen in under 3, you would see Specified Technologies Inc., which means that this listing, which is actually not for specified technologies, this listing is detailed to explain that the manufacturer who is listed here, the manufacturer whose product will produce fire resistance within the limitations defined, will function only and only if all these criteria are met. I will read a few more examples for everybody to just steep a little more into this. And this is from the Intertext certification directory, the Warner Kersey directory. And often you would notice, like in this case, that the product description for the double wall duct system, which is the listing itself, runs into 38 pages. And the listing combines information about a few designs and quite a few different test methods. And this looks pretty daunting to someone who may not understand the intricacies of what this is and how this may be arrived at. And it's good to just go back and step back and imagine that it started off with a project who wanted to demonstrate and prove compliance of a specific chemical compound or a material that it is able to produce the fire resistance characteristics in a given design. And what followed suit is that the series of projects and tests that were done to prove to certain specific projects that their materials or materials of one supplier can be installed in several design configurations which are detailed. And these different configurations go on adding up to more and more data to prove that the given component supplier, which is repeatably produced, is able to demonstrate this repeatability of fire resistance in several different designs. And hence, there are several product manufacturers whose listings go into many pages because over a period of years, they have conducted often a large number of tests, and many tests have been correlated with data, with information, with knowledge of the certification bodies who are able to provide the assurance that a given material is able to offer compliance to given tests, provided they are installed along with defined materials, they are installed in a given detail, they are installed in almost an extremely large document. As an example, this listing is of a silicon caulking material, and this listing is 237 pages, which means that the material which is offered in different configurations has several designs under which it has either been tested or evaluated, and the performance of the T rating, F rating, etc., is assured only and only if it is installed in those specific combinations and in those specific materials which are detailed and defined. And this brings me to a very well-known concept, but probably not very well understood subject, is the understanding of substrates and materials. A lot of people may see and notice and relate to paint as an example, where the application of paint, if done incorrectly, or if the application of a given paint is done on a surface where it does not bond well, or if the surface is not at the correct ambient temperature and the ambient environment in which it is supposed to be painted on, the paint does not last. And this is very important for people who are new to the subject to understand that if a paint has been able to demonstrate its performance on when applied to, let's say, stainless steel, the same performance cannot be expected if the paint is applied to a concrete wall or a gypsum board or wood of a given type. And almost absolutely the same goes for a lot of, or almost all types of fire stopping material. Because if you go back and imagine those slides where we were talking of chemical reactions, that for these fire stopping materials and systems to function, to be able to bring back the fire resistance rating, which was originally designed and kept in mind that, yes, we have a 2-hour rated corridor. It can only function if the substrate onto which it was tested, listed, and demonstrated to function on, and if the installation method is the same, it is only then and only then that the re-rating will actually function. And often these requirements are detailed very, very well in codes and standards and specifications, but sometimes not so well. And sometimes people don't quite comprehend what it means and what these things mean. I'll take an example of some pages out of the UAE Fire and Life Safety Code, though I'm pretty sure that other codes in the world are all in a similar direction. So yes, the UAE Fire and Life Safety Code, as a lot of you are familiar with, would point to multiple standards, so American standards, European standards, sometimes even British standards, to be used to demonstrate conformity of or compliance to a given property. But a very interesting line, which is in 3.3.7 below, and I will read this, that there is a single source limitation, which means the fire stopping systems for each kind of classified assembly should be obtained from a single manufacturer. Materials from different manufacturers should not be installed. And what this is alluding to is saying that if a listed system has been defined in a given way, you cannot just interchange manufacturers. The code goes on to detail several aspects, like which are equally important. As I said, you design, you install, you inspect, and you maintain. The Firestop Contractors Association, FCIA, also talks about this in several platforms they call DIM. Installation, identification, and labeling, inspection and field control, maintenance, and management. These very important aspects are detailed in the code, defining how and why these things should be maintained. And this is kind of the beginning to understand the importance of inspection and maintenance. If you give a few seconds and imagine back the scenario, and just imagine that there are a bunch of people in a manufacturing location who are doing their jobs every day to ensure that there is exact repeatability of the chemical compound that is produced and released out of the factory. We will all be able to practically imagine and understand that there are deviations. Suppliers change, components change, quality processes are not exactly machine repeatable. People change. We are in difficult times. We are in an era where people movement, material movements have been restricted, but you would continue to get the same product and the same material? Probably not. And this is the reason why it is very, very important that people who understand the subject of fire stopping, right from the detail of how fire resistance is created and maintained in original partitions. So imagine back the fire rated wall assembly, which was designed and installed using a manufacturer of a gypsum board, where only the manufacturing location of the gypsum board manufacturer is repeatedly audited for ensuring that the same board is produced. But these steps, which are equally important to ensure that the same design is installed, the same components are used in the installation, may or may not be there. And the next layer is that there is someone who will cut open and break into this wall system. And then another set of people, or maybe the same, would try to bring back and re-rate this openings using various types of chemicals and mechanical systems to bring back the fire resistance rating. To give you an example of how important this is, let's imagine a 5-star hotel, a 300-room 5-star hotel which is to be built in Dubai or in UAE. It is estimated that without the cost of land, that you'd spend anywhere from 300 to 400 million dirhams to build such a hotel. And as per thumb rule of the MEP work, or the mechanical, electrical, plumbing works, which is tipped to be around 35% of the cost. So you would spend anywhere from 100 to 140 million dirhams as a cost in the part of the project, and you will pay this money to various stakeholders, right from designers to contractors to subcontractors to material suppliers. And this money is paid to derate potentially what was originally designed to be fire resistant rated walls, assemblies, roofing, etc. And this money is spent to derate as well as re-rate and bring it back, which means you have a series of layers of people who are coming into the picture who need to comprehend very, very well how the original rating was brought about and how the original rating is to be brought about back again after cutting in and bringing it back. So you need a good bunch of inspectors who are specialized in the work that they do. It's not someone who may be able to say, oh, look at that and look at that, and someone who will be able to read the drawings. But you need someone who is not only able to read the details of the given project, but to be able to go back and refer to the listings and how the listings define limitations. You need specialist inspection agency as defined in the UAE Fire and Life Safety Code in several places, where a lot of details which are probably not submitted as part of the project, but details which are on the listings, on hundreds of pages of listings, which would need to be cross-referenced and checked to ensure that the re-rating is actually brought back to what it originally was. So it brings me to the two very good ASTM standards. These ASTM standards are referred in the UAE Fire and Life Safety Code of Practice as well. And someone was asking the Astm standards. These are the Astm E2174 for on-site inspections of installed Firestop systems, and the E2393 for the on-site inspections of installed fire-resistive joint systems and perimeter fire barriers. And I would encourage people who are listening to this webinar today that you look up these standards and you do a quick read to these two very wonderfully designed standards, because often the subject of installation of fire stopping material is very, very important. Because if you would kind of imagine back the example that I was sharing, that you spend 100 to 140 million dirhams out of 400 million for derating and re-rating the fire and life safety strategy, the key strategy, which is important to ensure that people's lives are not under threat. So yes, I would encourage you to kind of give a read to these standards, and these standards will also give a very, very good insight to authorities having jurisdictions, to insurers, to contractors, to get a better understanding of how to ensure specifications and contracts are written, and to make sure that the activities that we are involved in are able to align with what was originally designed, originally thought of in the fire and life safety strategy. So this brings me kind of towards the end of my presentation today. I have a few poll questions that I'm going to be asking on the next slide. And after that, I will show on the screen the next webinar series that we will be starting in the month of December. And I'll share the link in the chat window as well, but for kind of everybody to register in case they want to as well. And you're most welcome to write on the questions in the chat window, and I will be taking these questions. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry for an expected issue that I'm not able to run the poll and the system has gone. Uh, I would be skipping the poll, and I would welcome everybody to just share the questions on the screen, on the chat window, and I'm going to share again the next series of webinars and a link for everyone to register for this next series of webinars while I read through the questions and try to answer them one by one. Maybe some of the questions that were asked at the beginning, I might have missed them. I would humbly request all of you to please repeat those questions while I take these questions now. The presentation is over, and I'll take a 5-second break. So I'm going to start answering the questions that are coming in. There's a question from Mangesh, which is saying, what is more effective? Tradition 2 mm GI plus 100 density rock pool / side rise or Hilti intumescent. I am very sorry, Mangesh. I wish such a question could be answered straight away in such a platform. Your question has to be answered with an understanding of where is this getting installed? How is this getting installed? What is the past data and listing of such a combination in a given design, in a given system? Another question coming in from Muhammad is the applicator should be certified by ADCD or Firestop can be done by the main contractor or the gypsum partition subcontractor? So Mohammed, this is very well detailed in the fire stopping section of the UAE Fire and Life Safety Code of Practice. And I would probably schedule a call later after the webinar in the coming days with you, and we can walk through these code sections to answer this question, exactly how the UAE Fire and Life Safety Code talks about it. There's a question from Kenneth Wong. Do we need applicator to be certified for sealant application for the fire-rated gypsum wall in a hotel wall? Kenneth, I will go back to basics, and if you just imagine back the slides, it is important to answer this question. You must understand this. Who understands what is the original fire-rated wall? How it was installed? What is the rating? And then how is the re-rating process ensured? Are you ensuring the re-rating process through a listed system or not? And whoever is doing this as per the listed system, do they have any background of doing that fire stopping installation? Do they have training? The UAE Fire Code defines these training requirements, and there is a very good chapter, which is a few lines that you must go back and read through to answer this question very, very well. Syed Jahid wants to know what are the main points in penetration to get fire rating. I'm sorry, this is very generic. I will not be able to understand. It's a very generic question. Are you providing training certificate at the end of this training? Yes, Jay, the professional development hour can be asked from the SFPE UAE chapter. The email address was at the beginning, and I will share that email address again for everybody to note down. And in the chat window again, I am sharing a link for attendees who are interested to register for the next webinar series, which is starting in December. The next webinar series is such that we have shifted to the Zoom platform instead of this Cisco WebEx, which unfortunately gets a little clunky sometimes. And it will be done on every second Thursday of every month, starting from December right up to June, as you would have seen some of the topics on the previous screen. I'll jump back into some of the questions. Yes, the webinar presentation will be available as a recording. I will be sending out an emailer tomorrow, and just in case you do not get it, please feel free to write back to the emails where you have received the information to attend the webinar. Mangesh is asking any specific input you can suggest for an audit for perimeter sealing, for Firestop and smoke seal for high-rise buildings. What are the standards recommended to NBC in India? Mangesh, a very simple answer to this is that please share the project details, and we would love to do the fire stopping inspection for you and do the audit. All right. Any old questions which I might have missed, please feel free to send them back here. Unfortunately, I have missed the questions because I had to restart the system. Edwin is asking that what is the best fire stop systems standard, BS or Nfpa? Well, there is no competition here in terms of which is better than the other. And I guess both the standards, or in fact, all the standard systems, whether they are the European standards or the British standards or Nfpa standards, they have come from different evolution cycles. And these cycles have, over the iterative process of, have factored in various accidents, various learnings and inputs from an extremely large spectrum of manufacturers. So it all depends on which is the geography, which is the occupancy type where a fire and life safety strategy has been implemented. And all that needs to be aligned. So in case there is a building or an occupancy type which has been designed as per the American codes for fire and life safety, then it is recommended, it is best that the compliance methodologies, whether it is test standards, installation standards, audit and inspection standards, should align with the American way of doing things. But I would not be able to comment, Edwin, that which is better using British standard or American standards. But yes, I would love to have a detailed discussion with you later if required. Now, there is a long question from Jonas. I'll try and read and see if I can answer. Professional opinion, if you have a wall construction A and it achieves 120 minutes fire resistance, but then you test the same construction combined with fire stopping / damper alternatives. The damper achieves 120 minutes, but the wall failed at 90 minutes. If you then use this assembly on site, what resistance should it have? Numerous designers and manufacturers state that it should be 2 hours because each system isolated achieves 2 hours, and in some cases even have certificates for those. However, when reading reports, it is clear that the damper / firestop or other combination led to an earlier failure of the wall, but the certificates or information never says that unless you read the reports. What are your thoughts on this? Jonas, this is a good question. Excellent question. I love it when there are people in the audience who talk about these details. So at the outset, first thing, if you have a 120-minute wall construction type A, two things to ask here is this 120-minute fire resistant rating, is it because it is a listed system, it is certified by a third-party certification body? And if so, when the same wall was built again to do the damper test, was it exactly built in the same way or not? And if that was not done, and if the certified and listed system was not recreated to conduct the secondary test, then the primary purpose of doing the test for the damper has failed. And I would feel, my professional opinion is that if you have a test report where the damper has failed at 90 minutes, and when I say the damper has failed, it is not the damper. It is a given design, and it is a given set of materials and a given set of installation methodology as a combination has failed. And it is really important to understand that this combination is what is the key. Because if you go back to some of the slides in my original thought, which I was sharing, is that the rating of a wall system has several layers to which the confidence is the repeatability of a manufacturer of a given product, the repeatability of the designer who has designed the same system, the repeatability of the installer, the repeatability of other components which build the wall system, and the very, very important mechanism of assurance to check that all these things align or do not align. But yes, it is fantastic that you are asking such questions. Such questions are what lead to better installations, and it is such questions that push product manufacturers to test several other configurations of their materials, arrive at a better learning of what they used to think is fire rated or not. And often these questions end up adding to the listings of a given manufacturer. I hope that kind of answers your question, but we would love to have a chat offline as well. So thanks everybody. This brings us to the end of not only today's session, but also the complete webinar series that we had started off back in April. Attendees who are interested in joining us for the second series of the webinars, which are again a series of webinars for better awareness as well as, of course, getting people ready to ask good questions is on your screens. You can see it, and in the chat, you would be able to have a link. You are welcome to click and register. You can choose to register to either one or several or all the webinars which are listed from December to the 10th of June. Thank you to each one of you for joining in, and I would love to take any other questions over an email or a phone call in the days to come. Thank you very, very much for the day.